Paper, Scissors. I am an independent consultant with close to my heart. Tonight I am going to do a quick overview with a few examples of our different texture pastes. So without further ado, I am going to share my screen. So the first paste I tested out was our Opaque Matte. And we go through a lot of this. I like it a lot for a lot of different reasons. So in our spruced up scrapbook kit layouts, I used the Opaque Matte mixed with some glitter and coated the pine needles and the spruce sprigs so that it Here we go. And so it was really fast. It absorbs color. So when I put in the glitter, it made it shimmer more. And then I used it again on the snowdrifts. And I added extra little markings because snow isn't really smooth. And so it gave a really nice dimension visually. There are there's hundreds of things that you can use this paste for. So one of the things that I wanted to show you is when you put it on and it dries, it dries flat. It dries the texture that you make it, but it's visually flat. There's no shine. It's not transparent. It's just extra texture to your paper. On the other hand, just like your paper, it picks up all of your color. Whether it's, in this case, I used our exclusive ink pads, or you could use our shimmer pens or our markers or water color palettes, you name it, the sky's the limit. So that gives you a really nice, fun way to play with paper. Another really, really, really intensely cool trick is if you use your texture paste and then you sprinkle some embossing powder on it. Well, typically when you emboss, it's pretty, it melts, but it's flat. And the trick with the embossing powder with the texture paste is when you put it on and then you heat it up, it bubbles and it puffs up. So you end up with this fantastic marriage of embossing while kind of giving the enameled look. So it's really nice texturally, and visually it just can make something pop. I love it. It's fast, it's easy, and dynamic. So next up is our transparent matte. Move my tray a little out of the way. So this is thinner, and it's kind of the texture of butter on a warm day, but not melted. Whereas our Opaque Matte is thicker. It's like buttercream icing. So when you're spreading it, it's thicker and you're basically doing cake decorating. It's really controlled, and with the thickness, you can get the easier peaks and valleys where this is thinner and it fills in on stencils really nice. The transparent pastes are both a resist. So if you take a stencil and you apply it onto, you put it over your paper and you smear your transparent matte, for instance. When it dries clear. And when you ink over it, because it's a resist, it puts the ink or the coloring that you're using onto the paper, but not where you put your texture paste. So you've got a nice texture. It's matte and flat, but you get this neat background option. And so I did the exact same stencil on both of these, but they look very different. So on this one, I put the stencil down and I smeared the paste over the stencil and let it dry. After it was dry, then I inked over it to get that resist look. On this one, on the other hand, I used a combination of our fantastic exclusive ink pads and created a background. And then I put my stencil on and did the transparent paste and let it dry. So it gives a different effect. You've still got the texture, but the ink is everywhere. So it's more of a texture feel versus a texture visual. It has its purposes. I really like it. Obviously, I've already made the card with it because I love it so much. And I made these at the same time. So just so you could see a compare and contrast. For the stencil, we have the stencil paper, and it's just a flat sheet, a package of flat sheets. And I used my Cricut using one of our older Cricut cartridges, which in this case was Art Booking. There we go. So the flower stencil from Art Booking. And I just cut it out. If you don't already have that Cricut cartridge, you can sign up through my link and go on ahead and get access to all of our older cartridges, which is really worth it in my opinion. And then the Dragonfly, I colored with our shimmer pens. I used raspberry, wisteria, and I must have used our new Lagoon because it's darker. And then I used our new Dragonfly stamp and thin cut set that is in our January, February idea book. So those are some ideas of what you can utilize the transparent matte as well as the opaque matte. Now it gets a little more fun. I think by far my personal favorite is the transparent gloss. I like the shimmer, I like the shine, I like how it dries, I like how it resists, just like the transparent matte, but I like that glassy look. And I use a lot of liquid glass on my projects to get that, but I can do that differently with this. It gives a raised texture versus just the enameling. And so what I did is I did not finish my projects for this, but I took one of our old retired embossing folders, and it's our old scallops, as you can tell. And then I took the glossy transparent paste and coated over it and let it dry. Now, to get this coloring that I used on several projects, I took the paste, and I know that I'm going to use a lot of this. So I went on ahead and used an empty jar and mixed a little daub of that with some of our reinkers. And if you've read my blog or followed me for long, you know I use reinkers a lot. I use it to reink my ink pads. I use it for texture paste. I use it for general coloring, creating my own ink pads. You name it, the list is long. So to get this almost an honeybee hive amber color, I used paprika, saffron, and Gold Rush. And I just experimented until I got the colors that I wanted and smeared away. I prefer a flexible plastic putty knife Some people like the metal ones. I don't. I want to be able to spread smoothly and have that flex. So again, I used the art booking cartridge and created another stencil of honeycomb. I used the embossing folders, and I used the palette. So for this, I used my stencil and smeared it on in until I got exactly what I wanted, which was kind of a messy, drippy hive. And then I used the palette and did a smear, because honey on a nice hot day should be kind of dripping out of the hive a little bit. At least that's what I thought. And then I've created a bee using our January, February idea book bee set. And I haven't quite decided what I'm going to do with this, except for make a card and add probably some ribbon or something. I don't know. I'll figure it out, but that's where I left off on it. And then these I will use in a scrapbook page at some point. I haven't decided. This was kind of, I should make this video, and I have to wait for everything to dry. And then finally, to show how it really resists, I used a stencil and embossed, well, textured really, the Dragonfly, let it dry, and then I used my shimmer pens to gloss over it. It gives it a nice little shimmer. It's kind of hard to tell with the autofocus feature in cameras these days, but you get the idea. And let it dry. And again, I'll use this as a tag in a mini scrapbook album. That is the gist of it. Now, I wanted to show you a side-by-side of how these pastes dry. You can see how the opaque matte dries, where it dries white, but it's flat. The transparent matte, you can see through. It's harder to tell on the white, but it's visible. And then the transparent gloss is just like this beautiful shimmery slick of melted ice. It's gorgeous. It has so many options, so much potential. I had one more project I was going to show you, but it requires the texture paste to be really, really, really horrifically thick and takes a long time to dry. And that is using your old embossing folders and coating it on like a thick coating of frosting. And when it's all the way dry, you peel it up. Now that can only be done with the gloss. This is thinner. It's kind of like mayonnaise. And when it dries, it's glossy, but it's also, it has a tensile strength. So you can, when you peel it up, it's kind of like the texture of a face mask that has dried, and you can peel it off, and it's a little stretchy, but not quite as fibrous as Lycra. And it's great to do little tears and whatnot onto a scrapbook page. When I have my sample dry, I will add a photo onto my Facebook page and Instagram. That concludes our discussion tonight. I look forward to covering our next topic on Saturday. Have a great week, everyone. Get your creative hat on, and I will talk to you later.